And there were a couple times when we were doing those improvs where I remember some guy started an altercation in this restaurant where we had stopped to get something to eat. And the owner of the restaurant was like, "Do something to me." And I was like, I'm not real. It's a costume. Like, it was the most impotent feeling I think I've ever had in my whole life. Step Brothers.
This is how we do it.
Da, 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 da.
Hey, I never asked you.
Yeah.
Do you like guacamole?
People ask me, do people always come up to you about Step Brothers? And I say, only when I'm in public. And every single time I'm in public. It's a really beloved movie, I think, because it appeals to a lot of different people at different ages. Like, it actually appeals to young kids because the stories that we're telling in that movie really happened to me and Will. Like, someone made Will lick white dog crap, like, for real. Like, that whole gang fight thing was real, happened to me when I was like trying to start a gang fight with some friends who abandoned me, and then the other gang found me. I did have a brother who had a drum set, for real, who was very particular about his drums and would notice if there was a nick on the sticks. There's a lot of stuff in that movie that came from my own personal life. So in a weird way, even though it's a really over-the-top movie, I'm really proud that it's one of the most noticed movies that I did because so much of it was personal. So much of it was really my real life, you know? Also, like, I wrote it with Will and Adam, and Will was like the transcriber. He would be at the keyboard, and then we'd all just kind of take turns telling each other stories and making each other laugh. So it was like improvised in the writing room, and then we'd improvise on top of that. And Will is one of the funniest people I've ever met. And what's funny about him is when you're with him like on an everyday kind of basis, he's funny, but he doesn't even really know why he's funny. Both him, his father, and his brother Pat, who I know pretty well, there's this quality that they have that's just, I don't know. I always say, like, Will could read the phone book and make you laugh. He could just put a certain stank on something and it just becomes funny. It's like magical fairy dust. And another thing I noticed about Will was when he swears, like, the filthier he gets, the funnier it gets. And the angrier he gets, the funnier it gets. Me, if I swear, like, I'm from the south side of Chicago, you know, it comes out pretty hard. Like, even if I'm trying to be funny or over the top, there's a little bit of violence or something in it. But Will can say the craziest swear words, and it's funny every time.
And then you sit down and you write Dale and Brennan a check for $10,000. Or I'm gonna shove one of those fake hearing devices so far up your ass, Brennan, you can hear the sound of your small intestine as it produces shit!
I love that guy. He'll always feel like a brother to me, I think. Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Walk hard. Hard.
Walk hard.
You're always looking for something that is going to take everything that you've got to pull off. When I did Walk Hard, it really was like right on the edge of what I was capable of. All the singing and all the acting and I played 14 years old at the beginning of the movie. I think we wrote 35 original songs in 6 months, like before we started shooting. I mean, a lot of people don't write 35 songs in their whole career. We had this amazing stable of songwriters and musicians around the movie. You know, Mike Andrews and Mike Viola and Dan Byrne. Marshall Crenshaw wrote the title song. So yeah, we were kind of like, it was this sort of musical laboratory. And in a weird way, that was part of the writing process of the movie because the script had places for these, like, then he sings a 1950s ballad, you know, like, all right, we gotta come up, what would this characters, what would he say?
Take my hand, take my hand. We're gonna walk to the park.
A lot of the process was me kind of learning the character as we were writing these songs and then injecting lyrics where I thought I could help. And yes, I did I did all my own singing and the performance of those songs. We lip synced them for the movie, but we had already recorded them, so it was like lip syncing to yourself. So we were making a satire of biopics, but the truth is, if you look at Ray Charles' life compared to Johnny Cash's life, compared to Jerry Lee Lewis's life compared to, there's so many similarities in these musicians' stories. A central traumatic event when they were younger, the loss of a sibling, the loss of a sense, like, going blind in Ray Charles' case. Even though we smashed them all together, it's not like we were pulling it out of the air. Like these things really happen in a lot of these people's lives.
Yeah, lighten it up just a bit here. Tell me, you're so busy, Dewey Cox. Do you have time to stop and smell the roses?
I've got no fucking sense of smell.
I wish it had done better at the box office because when it came out, I don't know what the competition was at the time, but we kind of got, our asses handed to us that first weekend. But as traumatic as that was for something that we all worked so hard on and put so much love into, at the end of the day, I said to myself, well, you can either have a box office smash or you can have a beloved cult movie, but you're really not going to get both of them, so which would you rather have? And I think I would rather have a movie that people are obsessed with in a cult-like way, like musicians across the board, everyone from Bonnie Raitt to Jack White's in the movie. But after we made the movie, I went and saw Jack on tour one time, and he didn't know I was coming. I knocked on the tour bus door, and he opened the door. He's like, dude, we're watching the movie right now. Come on in here. Glenn Fry turned to me at a Lakers game, and he's like, that's like a documentary, that movie. We were trying to be as over the top as we could be, while still maintaining, some reality for the periods, but it wasn't over the top enough. For some people, like this, Glenn Fry was like, well, if you were around for the Eagles and at the height of our fame, like, it was even crazier than the dark places you went as Dewey Cox. But that was a really special thing. I'm really proud of that movie. And I think one day we probably will go out on tour again, because I did like an 8-city tour as Dewey Cox, because now people know the music, so I think they would show up. Boogie Nights.
Can I ask you something? Do you work out?
Yeah.
Yeah, you look like it. What do you squat?
Not two.
Super. What about you?
I'd already done a dozen movies when Paul, asked me to do that first movie. But he was the first person who was like, I know you. You were in this, and you're in that, and you're in this, but I know that you have more to give than what you've given all these other directors. I see you as like a leading character. And he really was the first person in my life who even realized that I had done 12 movies at that point. Before that, every time I'd meet a new director, they think they were discovering this amazing actor, which is really flattering. But after a while, you're like, well, I've been doing it a little while now. Like, isn't anyone piecing this together? And Paul did. And Mark had only done one movie at that point, this movie, Fear. And he was known for his underwear ads, but he really fell right into it. And I always say Boogie Nights was the funnest summer of my life, because it was filmed all throughout the summer. It was just pool parties and doing fake cocaine, and it was fake, by the way. It was like the cocaine in that movie was made of like lactose, or like the sugar that's in milk, I think, and then dried. So we'd snort that stuff, and in a weird way, it would make you hyped up because it was sugar, So you get these like bursts of energy when you do it. I remember thinking, like, what's happening to this cocaine that I'm snorting? Because we were doing a lot of it on camera, And then one night I was getting home and I was like in the shower and I was blowing my nose in the shower, and like these chunks of white sugar, like gelatinous stuff started coming out of my nose. I was like, oh, that's what happens to the cocaine. It just lives in my sinuses until I eventually like absorb it.
You want to take it from the top?
Yeah, let's try it.
Okay.
He will rock you. The heat will roll you.
The one that was original was Feel the Heat, or Feel My Heat. I wrote the music to that one and Paul wrote the words. I get like royalties from that song, Feel the Heat, still, because it's like an original composition. I'm not sure how proud I am of that song, but It's definitely a funny moment in the movie. All that stuff in the recording studio, too, is all improvised. In a way, is really scary, but is also really empowering. You're like, all right, let me at it. Paul knew my tendencies. Phil Hoffman, too. Phil Hoffman improvised a ton of stuff in Hard 8 when he's at the craps table. So Paul already knew, like, these guys can already kind of vamp on a theme if I just give them a direction. So when he wrote the script for Boogie Nights, it already had things in it like John Reilly talked to them about the tapes and getting the tapes back from the studio. Like that whole scene where I come into the recording studio and I talk to Robert Downey Sr., you know, it's Robert Downey Jr.'s father. He played the head of the studio, and so none of that was written. It was all just me desperately trying to say whatever I had to say to get this guy to give us our tapes back so we could go get a record deal.
Now you're talking above my head, all right? I don't know this industry jargon, YP, MP, whatever, okay? All I know is that I cannot get a record contract. We cannot get a record contract unless I take these tapes. And granted, the tapes themselves are your you own them, okay? But the magic that is on the tapes, that fucking heart and soul that we put into those tapes, that is ours, and you don't own that.
That character has to be one of the craziest I think I've ever played. I remember seeing a magician at the Magic Castle who had that same outfit. He had the same thing, like naughty ladies and as his assistants, you know. And we were like, oh, well, there he is. Like, that's the character. So I was basically doing an impression of a guy that we saw perform at the Magic Castle. He had different hair than me, but Magnolia. When we were trying to get Boogie Nights made, and we were struggling, we were just kind of dead in the water for a little while there in the summer. And Paul and I were obsessed with the show Cops at the time. It was a pretty new phenomena. I had a goatee beard, and Paul kept teasing me like, you gotta shave that thing off, man. Come on, you like, what are you, some kind of hipster? And he just really teased me about the beard. And finally I broke down, I was like, all right, I'll start to shave it off. And then I was like, well, why don't I just see what a mustache looks like? Because I'd never had one before. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the perfect cop mustache. And I called Paul, I was like, we have to do our version of Cops. And he's like, totally.
Just calm down, calm down.
Calm.
Okay, I got a call to this apartment, report of a disturbance.
There's no disturbance.
Okay, I got a call of a disturbance. Your door was open, and I just want to see what's going on.
Yeah, but there's no disturbance.
Okay, well then you got nothing to worry about.
It got me a real LAPD uniform. I bought like a 9mm looking BB gun from a sports store. And we just started improvising. We'd drive around in his car, like just to make each other laugh, really, and just kind of recreate Cops. Some really crazy stuff happened during the improvisations with Phil in particular. One point, I stopped carrying that BB gun because it's already a felony to impersonate a police officer. And if you have a gun on you, then it kicks it up into this other level. So I left the gun at home this one day, and then Phil like escaped from me while I was trying to arrest him. And I went for my gun because it was like, this is when you would go for your gun if someone was running away from you. And I was like, I lost my gun. I lost my gun. That's the worst thing that can happen to a cop.
I lost my gun today.
What?
I lost my gun today when I left you, and I'm the laughingstock of a lot of people. I wanted to tell you. I wanted you to know, and it's on my mind. And it makes me look like a fool. And I feel like a fool.
We eventually did get Boogie Nights made after we made those videos. And the movie, you know, Boogie Nights came out. And then when Paul was sitting down to do his next script, he really loved that character. In fact, the name Jim Kurring was just something I made up on the spot. So Detective or Officer Jim Kurring in Magnolia was, the whole character was based on those improvisations. And then Paul took those tapes and made them like more romantic, gave me that love interest with Melora Walters. He turned the losing the gun thing into like this really critical emotional moment for the character. It's really funny though when you think like, I just did it to cover up the fact that I didn't have my fake gun on me. And there were a couple times when we were doing those improvs where I remember some guy started an altercation in this restaurant where we had stopped to get something to eat. And the owner of the restaurant was like, do something to me. And I was like, I'm not real. It's a costume. Like, it was the most impotent feeling I think I've ever had in my whole life, not being able to step in and everyone looking at me like, do something. Chicago, the musical.
Honey,
came as soon as I could. Box. First of all, I'm born and raised in Chicago, so even though we really didn't shoot any of that movie in Chicago, I have a soft spot in my heart for that movie. I grew up doing musicals from the time I was 8 years old. That's all I did. I was involved in theater and community theater and theater at school, and that's all audiences wanted to hear in my neighborhood were musicals. And then I went to acting school, and I kind of took this opinion like, well, musicals, that's what you do if there's nothing else to do, like in my neighborhood. Like I had to do musicals because I was interested in theater. Like, and then that movie came along, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, I can really do this. Like, I already know how to do this. I know how to sing a show tune, you know? And then I realized, like, you know, you should not be looking down on musicals. American musical theater is one of the few things, other than maybe jazz, that was actually invented in this country. It was like a real return to form for me, and it was very moving and very personal, like that journey back to musical theater. And I also remember just really trying to play that character as honestly as I could. You know, it's already kind of a satire in a way. It's like a social satire, that movie. And I knew it was going to be funny, and I knew the music was going to be entertaining, but I knew also that for it to really work, for you to care about Roxy Hart in that movie, someone has to love her. And Amos Hart really loves her, you know.
You actually did your own, or like kind of curated your own makeup.
And the costume too had a lot to do with the costume. I grew up doing clowning, doing mime work and clowning. I went to a thing called clown ministry at my church, where we'd go to like nursing homes or like street fairs or whatever. I almost went to clown college, which was a thing that Ringling Brothers used to have down in Florida. But then someone warned me, like, if you go to clown college, you're under contract for 5 years, and they may be calling you a clown in the circus, but you're really shoveling up after the elephants. So maybe, you know, you got a good thing going here in the Chicago theater scene. Talladega Nights, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby.
Shake and bake in full effect.
It's always been like that. Me and Ricky, since we're little kids, man.
Yeah.
We go together like Chinese food and chocolate pudding, let's face it.
Yeah, but Cal, those are two things that don't really go together, though.
And we go together like cocaine and waffles.
No, like for instance, if I say peanut butter and
ladies. Will and Adam asked me to do Anchorman, the movie, but I was doing another movie at the time and I couldn't do it. So it was like this big damn it moment for all of us, like, oh, I really wanted to do that. You guys really wanted me to. So when they finally put Talladega Nights together, like, we gotta have you in there, man. And I was like all over it. So when we're shooting that movie, we had to be in the infield of a real race. You know, it's just rah, rah, it's so loud. We're shooting on racetracks is not fun. It's awful, actually. It stinks from all the burning tires and fuel, and it's so loud, you feel like you're losing your mind. I would go and hide in a trailer and put, you know, what do you call it, ear protection on, just because you'd almost start to feel sick from the noise, like somehow. It was like, really like, anyway. Poor me. I was making a comedy about NASCAR. I got a message for all of them. Ready? Shake and bake.
what does that do? Did that blow your mind? That just happened.
What is that, a catchphrase or is that epilepsy?
Shake and bake.
Yeah. What?
Shake and bake.
We had to do these driver introductions. It's a real thing they do at NASCAR. They announce, this is so-and-so, driving car number 32, hailing from wherever, North Carolina, Cal Naughton Jr. And then next it's like, hailing from Paris, France, Jean Girard. And boo, they heard the word France, and I thought they were gonna like rush the stage and tear him apart. And he came out, he was like, like making these faces, and I was like, I had just met Sasha at that point, and I was like, Sasha, I'm sorry, man, are you okay? And he's like, are you kidding? I live for that. I love that. That's what I want to happen. I want to piss the audience off so much that they want to attack me. That's like my happy place. I remember we did like driver training at this place where you actually get to go in a NASCAR, a real, stock car and go like 140 miles an hour or something. And so me, Will, Adam, and Sasha all did this. And then afterwards, they gave us our times. I was the top time, I'm proud to say. And Sasha, I think, was third out of the four of us. And then Sasha, these kind of good old boys who are running the racetrack are like, all right, y'all. Here's it. And he's like, and Sasha, you came in third place. And Sasha goes, am I the fastest Jew you've had? And these guys were like, they just couldn't believe. And he was like, they were like, well, you know what? I think you might be. I think you might be. But that's like Sasha's stock and trade. He loves like figuring out what is it that's going to make you uncomfortable, and then, bam, like try to hit the target right in the middle. He's a genius in that way. Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty.
Look, Red, I know I'm still the freshman of the class, and you're the big man on campus. I get that, I respect it. But I wanted to meet because I'm asking for your help. I'm trying to build something out here, like you built Boston, like a real dynasty. And frankly, I think that would be good for the league.
It was a really special character because I had about a week to get ready. Someone else fell out of the part, and then Adam McKay asked me to do it, and I had 7 days before we started shooting the pilot. And so I was really like kind of guessing. But he was of the same generation as my own late father, and there were a lot of things about his sort of swagger and his optimism in the face of everyone telling him things couldn't be done, or this was impossible, or that was impossible. My dad also had a really similar thing, like, oh yeah? Well, wait till you see what I do. Maybe that would be impossible for someone else, but I'll be damned if I'm not gonna do it. And then the scenes with Jerry and his mother, like I lost my mother very suddenly, was not able to mourn her in the way that you would if someone had a long illness, you know? So in a weird way, these scenes that I had with Sally Field were me processing the death of my own mother, you know? It was like this heavy stuff. And then, you know, to have someone like Jeannie Buss, his real daughter, who's also portrayed in the show, to have her tell me, like, you know, you smoked just like my dad. Like, you nailed it. You were just like my dad. Like, and I never met the guy. And there's very little footage of him. There's like very kind of staged interviews where he's giving a certain version of his personality to the camera, you know, just talking about the business of the team. A lot of what I had to go on in terms of that character was what people said about him, or things that were written about him in books, or the very few little glimpses that you got of him on TV. But yeah, that was another one of those roles that I felt took everything I had at that moment to pull off. Wreck-It Ralph.
Question, Ralph. We've been asking you to Baden for years now, and tonight you finally show up. Why is that?
I don't know, I just felt like coming. I mean, I suppose it has something to do with the fact that, well, today is the 30th anniversary of my game.
Well, happy anniversary, Ralph.
Thanks, Satan.
It's 13, actually.
Got it. I think I said no for like 8 months, and then this director, Rich Moore, just kept coming back. And then finally he was like, just tell me, why is it that you're resistant to doing this? And I was like, well, it's Disney, it's this huge corporation, they're gonna kind of control what we do. And I've heard the way that they make a lot of those animated movies, you're not even talking to the other actor that you're working with, you're sort of pretending in these scenes, and like, I just know that that's not gonna be my vibe. Like, I'm not gonna succeed in that kind of, you know, situation. He's like, we don't have to do it like that. We can do it however we want. We can have the other actors in the studio. We'll do that. And you can improvise as much as you want. You know, like, we'll just edit together what we need, you know? And finally I was like, okay. And I came around, and thank God I did, because number one, it was like one of the best paydays of my life. And then it turned out it was just like a dream job. I got to improvise every single day. We went in there, and we're never pressed for time. I don't have to put a costume on or go through makeup. I just show up and goof around for a while with the guys, and then we're always ahead of the animators, you know, because it takes them so long. It was a wonderful experience, and Disney was like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like, as long as you're turning in funny stuff.
Hi, mister. Hello.
Oh, man, you scared me, kid. Ah, nearly soiled myself.
What's your name?
Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph.
You're not from here, are you?
Having children myself, and gone through a lot of children's movies, I always thought like, such a shame when they sell kids short on the emotional stuff. When they just make it like kinetic, dynamic energy that's meant to just distract you like fast food or like candy, you know, like I wanted kids to have something they could hold on to emotionally, you know. I was like, this movie is about a male character and a female character having a friendship. It's not a daddy and a daughter. It's not a romantic thing. It's about a man and a woman having a friendship. Those are the main characters of the movie, and I was like, that's a really special, beautiful thing, and it's something that kids really understand, you know, something comes very naturally to them, I think, as younger kids, and then as they get into the tween and teenage years, it becomes a really fraught thing, like how do I have a friendship with someone of the opposite sex? Like, how do I navigate this? And I thought that was a really important thing for us to try to be honest about. You know, this is what it feels like to be friends with somebody. This is what it feels like when your friend lets you down. Like, this is how you call them out on, or this is how it feels when you let your friend down, when you act in a selfish way instead of doing what's right for your friend. Like, you know, if you could put all that stuff into a really entertaining movie with lots of candy in it and racing, then I think you're giving something of meaning to kids. And it worked like a charm, I must say. Yeah. Stan and Ollie. Like when I was a kid, I would always have like one best friend, like one ride or die person, you know, whether it was Terry Rafferty or Jim Lampisona or whatever. At different periods in my life, I had these people that were like, we were just really joined at the hip, you know. There's something about me that is uncomfortable with a solo starring spot. Like there's something about me that really loves lifting up another person, you know. Because I think you're kind of taught that in Chicago theater in a way. Like the way I always explained it to myself was like, well, in Chicago, you're not going to become a star overnight in Chicago. Whereas in New York, if you're on Broadway and the show's a hit, like boom, the whole country is going to know about you. Or LA, you do a movie, boom, like you could become a star overnight in those two places. In Chicago, it takes a bit more work, and really the way you succeed in Chicago doing a play is make the other person really good. Because both Steve Coogan, who played Stan Laurel, and I both really understand. We've both been part of duos, and we both understand what it's like to be a performer, to be, you know, traveling a lot together and having to present something to the audience no matter how you're feeling inside personally. I have a phobia with my eyes, like I have a lot of trouble with people touching my eyes or getting close with makeup, but I knew I had to have brown eyes for that part. And I was like, John, you gotta do this for Oliver Hardy. You gotta get over this eye thing. And it took a long time, but I did eventually learn how to put those contacts in over and over. And then I did it for Jerry Buss too after. But anyway, it was like this labor of love, like this holy mission to help people remember who Oliver Hardy was and how important those guys were. I mean, there's so many incredible things about them. The fact that they didn't know each other before they started working together.
Mr. Hardy, I believe you suffered a mild heart attack today. I also believe there is some evidence of congestive failure.
Oh dear God, I knew it.
The prosthetic stuff was really interesting. It was like wearing a mask on your whole body. Like the only part of me that you could see for real was this right here and the ends of my fingers. The rest is like prosthetic here, you know, this big thing. And I wore these weighted like sacks inside of the suit because one of my pet peeves is when you see someone in a fat suit, like all of a sudden they're like, oh, they just start moving way too fast or too agilely for someone of that size. And so I wanted to weigh myself down so it would, so you could have a sense of the effort it took for this guy to move through the world. I remember sitting outside sometimes when we were making that movie because I had to stay cool all the time or I would get heat stroke. So they had this cooling thing pipes that went inside this t-shirt and cold water would go in there. And then sometimes I would just sit outside on a stoop, you know, outside of a theater in a t-shirt, you know, like with this whole getup on. And it made me realize like how hard it must have been for Oliver Hardy for his whole life to be that big. Because he did not want to be that big. Even as, you know, as a child, all the way through their fame and stardom, he was torn up about the fact that he was as big as he was. And I always thought that was a real kind of like personal tragedy for him. And then I didn't really realize what it felt like until I was sitting there outside of a theater in London. People would walk by. They couldn't recognize me as myself, of course. You'd see them coming and they'd clock me. And then all of a sudden, as soon as they realized, oh, he's a terribly fat man, like they would look away as if they're embarrassed to make eye contact with you. And going back to Mr. Cellophane, it's a feeling like that. Like, you don't want to see me. You think I'm an embarrassment to the world, so you don't want to see me. And people don't mean to be cruel in that way, but that's how it feels, you know? Check it out with Dr. Steve Brule.
A donkey's bray, a chicken's balk, a squeaking rat's a ticking clock. Any sound, depends on how you use it, could be a sweet sound of music.
Well, I was the executive producer on that show, and it was one of the crazier things I've ever been involved in. I produced it with Tim and Eric, Tim Heidecker and Eric Wareheim. I'm really proud of my involvement in that show. Just because it's so unique, you know, it's one of the most original things I think I've ever seen. Like, and Steve has a real particular point of view. I'm not sure what kind of doctor he is, but I don't think his advice for medical matters would be my first opinion. I might get a second opinion on that.
The best diet consists of food that occurs in the environment. That's natural food, doesn't have a barcode, doesn't have a lot of processing, doesn't have a lot of ingredients you can't pronounce. I don't know. It's real food. Apples, berries, pears, watermelons, corn dogs.
How's Dr. Steve doing these days?
You'd have to ask him. I don't know. Like, apparently you have to fax his friend Denny, and then Denny pages Steve, and then Steve pages Denny back, and then you get a fax back. It's a long process, but he is a pretty mysterious person and hard to reach, yeah. I learned early on doing theater when I was a kid, you know, like, don't go in the lobby in your costume. Like, that is like a no-no, because you break the spell for the audience. You say, like, you remember that thing you just watched that you really enjoyed, that you maybe went along with and believed I was this whatever I was? Well, then afterwards, if you see me in the lobby in my costume, it's like, oh, that was all fake. Like, in order to keep the illusion real, you gotta leave the character backstage or on stage. I personally think that's really important for audiences. It's a beloved show for a lot of people, and I'm glad, because I think the world needs more weird things in it. Mr. Romantic. So I started this show called Mr. Romantic that I do now. It's a vaudeville show where I do songs of love, and he's this kind of mythical vaudeville clown, very much in the vein of Mr. Cellophane. Yeah, we have an album coming out in June. Really, the inspiration of wanting to do this show, Mr. Romantic, was the world is in a tough spot right now. I started doing it about 3 years ago, and I remember looking like, man, like empathy is on the run here. Like, people are really divided, and there's just so much misunderstanding among people. And I thought, what can I do to make things better? And I thought, well, I can sing, I can dance, I can tell people that I love them, I can do a show about love. Could I be loved forever? You know, could you love someone else forever? Are you lovable? Then I have to say, the show has been an incredible, when I go out there on that stage to be Mr. Romantic, because it feels like this sort of holy humanist, you know, mission that I'm on, yeah. Testo o croce, or Heads or Tails. One of my latest films that hasn't even come out yet, I don't think at this point, is called Testo o Croce. And that's Italian for Heads or Tails. And it's a spaghetti western kind of that takes place in Italy in the 1800s. And in it, I play Buffalo Bill Cody, the real Buffalo Bill Cody, who had this crazy Wild West show that created, in many ways, all of the myths of the American West. And he took the show for real to Italy 4 different times in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. I always wondered, why is it that Italians all of a sudden got into Westerns? Where the hell did that come from? Why would you make a spaghetti Western in the first place, even in the heyday of those movies? And I realized it all comes back to Buffalo Bill Cody. So I was like, wow, that is fascinating. That's how it happened, you know? It was a really fun character to play. He's a real P.T. Barnum kind of character. You know, he's just selling this story because he had a real gift for like telling people what they wanted to hear about themselves.